200,000 people, standing shoulder to shoulder on a hillside in the summer heat, waiting, not for a concert, not for a celebration, not for any ordinary public event. They were waiting to watch 11 people die. And when it finally happened, when those trucks moved forward one by one and the ropes went taut, the crowd did not look away. They had earned the right to watch every single one of them. This is the story of Stutthof concentration camp, the women who ran it like a personal torture chamber, and the public execution that 200,000 survivors, families, and witnesses demanded and received on a warm July afternoon in 1946, September 1st, 1939. Nazi Germany invades Poland. Within 24 hours, the killing begins. SS units, police squads, and military executioners move through Polish towns and villages, shooting clergy, professors, politicians, nobility, anyone who might organize resistance. Anyone remind the Polish people that they had a culture worth defending. The Nazis weren't just conquering Poland, they were trying to erase it. And to do that efficiently, they needed infrastructure. On September 2nd, 1939, one day after the invasion began, the Germans established their first concentration camp outside German borders. They called it Stutthof, built in a wooded area near Danzig, modern-day Gdańsk. Stutthof began as a civilian internment camp and grew into something far darker. By 1942, it was a fully operational SS concentration camp. By 1943, it had a crematorium. By June 1944, it had a gas chamber with a maximum capacity of 150 people per execution, and it kept expanding. 105 subcamps spread across northern and central occupied Poland. Nearly 100,000 prisoners passed through the system. Over 60,000 of them never came out. Prisoners died from typhus epidemics that swept the camp in waves. They died from starvation. They died from lethal injections administered by camp doctors in the infirmary. They were gassed with Zyklon B. They were marched to the Baltic Sea coast, forced into freezing water, and machine gunned from the shore. This was Stutthof, and it was run in significant part by women. In June 1944, the SS began conscripting women from Danzig and surrounding cities to serve as camp guards. What some of these women did with that authority is the kind of thing that makes you question everything you understood about human nature. Jenny Wanda Barkmann was known for her brutality toward prisoners, beating inmates with her bare hands with her whip until they stopped moving. Her victims included children. At her trial, she showed zero remorse. She changed her hairstyle every day. She flirted with prison guards. She wore stylish clothes to court like she was attending a social event rather than facing a death sentence. Wanda Klaff made no attempt to hide what she was. At trial, she stated openly, proudly, "I am very intelligent and I was very devoted to my work in the camps. I struck at least 2 prisoners every day. When she was in a particularly dark mood, she drowned female inmates in mud. She beat others to death with a club. Elizabeth Becker selected children to be sent to the gas chamber. She beat mothers in front of their children and children in front of their mothers and did it without flinching. Paradies had a specific method for winter. She ordered groups of female prisoners to strip completely naked and stand in the snow. Then she poured cold water over their bare skin. If anyone moved trying to survive, trying to feel something other than the cold, she beat them. Steinhoff beat female inmates and children to death. She selected prisoners for the gas chambers. She did it regularly, methodically, as part of her daily routine. During the trial, these women were described as behaving insolently, giggling, joking, as if the charges against them were mildly inconvenient rather than a detailed accounting of systematic murder. 4 of them wept when the sentences were read. Only Barkmann remained completely calm. The first Stutthof trial opened on April 25th, 1946, 11 defendants, 6 men and 5 women, charged with crimes against humanity, a legal category that had only recently been defined because the crimes being described had only recently been revealed to a world that was still struggling to process what it had discovered inside those camps. The evidence was overwhelming. Survivor testimony, camp records, physical evidence from the site itself. On May 31st, 1946, the verdict was delivered. 11 defendants convicted, 11 death sentences. The execution was scheduled for July 4th, 1946 at Biskupia Górka Hill near Gdańsk. And unlike the quiet, managed executions being carried out at Nuremberg behind walls, away from cameras, controlled and contained, this one would be different. This one one would be public. 3 days before the execution, Polish newspapers published the date. Workplaces announced a day off. Employers arranged transportation. The message was clear: come, witness. Remember, on the morning of July 4th, the sun was already hot by the time the crowds began arriving. By the time it was over, 200,000 people were packed onto that hillside, one of the largest public gatherings in post-war Polish history. Security forces were terrified a lynching would break out at any moment. The militia and army struggled to maintain any kind of order. At 5 p.m. exactly, 11 open trucks arrived at the execution ground. One prisoner standing on the platform of each truck, hands bound, legs tied, facing the crowd that had been waiting for this moment for years. Former Stutthof prisoner survivors, still wearing their striped camp uniforms, had volunteered to serve as executioners. They stepped forward and placed simple cord nooses around the necks of the condemned. The execution was designed deliberately. The trucks would move forward slowly. The drop would be short. The ropes would not break necks. Death would not be instant. It would take 10 to 20 minutes of strangulation in full view of 200,000 witnesses. The first truck began to move. Johann Paul's former commandant of the camp guards slid off the platform. Before the rope caught him fully, he managed to shout 2 words into the crowd: Heil Hitler. The crowd answered with something that wasn't words. As his body went still, the second truck moved forward. Then the third, then the fourth. One by one, 11 people who had spent years deciding who lived and who died inside Stutthof's walls experienced something they had never once offered their own victims: the chance to watch what was coming before it arrived. When one truck's engine failed to start, a former Stutthof prisoner simply stepped forward and pushed the condemned off the platform himself. The crowd surged forward. People shouted into the summer air, "For our husbands, for our children." When the last body went still, security forces opened the perimeter. The crowd moved to the gallows. They tore off buttons, cut pieces of fabric. Some kicked at what remained. They had been told for years by the camp system, by the regime that built it, by the indifference of those who looked away, that their lives and the lives of their families had no value. On July 4th, 1946, 200,000 people stood on a hillside in the summer sun and answered that claim. The bodies were later taken to the Medical University of Gdańsk, used in anatomy classes. No ceremonies, no marked graves, no memorial stones, just 11 names that history refuses to allow the world to quietly forget. There were no tears shed for the guards of Stutthof, not one.